couple of my buddies and I decided that we were going to go to Colorado and Utah to ride, so I went to the dealer and picked up a 2021 KRX ES model. It was a brand new machine. I bought all the options that I thought that I would need, which is in the boxes there. I started installing them after we brought it home, and the sliders did not have any hardware. We put the spare tire carrier on, and the shocks were too weak to hold up the OEM rim and tire. Kawasaki replaced the whole carrier to give me new shocks. After mounting the last of the accessories, I was on my way home from my buddy's house, and the machine started making the jumping out of gear noise, and it sounded like this. The machine had about 20 miles on it at the time. I called the dealer. They asked me to bring it to them. That was the first of many trips to the dealer for this machine. I had bought this machine in May for a September Colorado-Utah trip. The dealer said, take it. It's not a safety issue. It's not going to hurt anything. Use low range when you can. It won't jump out of gear. The parts are not available. When they become available, we'll order them and get back to you. We were able to make the trip. I got along okay with the machine. Fell in love with it out there. We started planning for a second trip. When I came back, I called the dealership. Parts still weren't available. They said, we got some of them in. We'll call you when we get the rest in. I went to unzip my rear soft panel, and the zipper fell apart. So I took it to the closest dealer to me, and they warranty exchanged it. Not long after that, I started getting a feeling like the machine was shifting. I took it to the dealer, and they replaced the clutch assembly for premature weight wear. While I was there, since I had not heard from the other dealer, I asked this dealer if they could fix the jumping out of gear problem for me, and they said they could. We scheduled an appointment for the week of Labor Day, which would have been a lull in my riding schedule. On Labor Day, I took it to the mountains for a ride. We got started up the mountain. Even though my gauge said 176, on the display, I was boiling over. Come to realize that the fan wasn't working. I was able to limp it back to the trailer with some help with some fellow riders, and I had an appointment scheduled that week to have the transmission rebuilt, so I called the dealer. I asked them to take a look at that also. The dealer replaced what needed to be replaced in the transmission. They started on the cooling system. They replaced the fan, the ECU, the breaker. They were having a hard time getting it to work. Eventually they got it to work. They had me come pick up the machine. I rode it around the house a little bit that weekend. I took it to a Hatfield and McCoy trail, unloaded it. We got started, and the axle on the driver's side rear fell out and the check engine light came on. I took it back to the dealer and I was advised that shims were going to need to be ordered for the axle and that the engine was going to need to be rebuilt. They didn't know if the parts would come in time for me to make my bucket list vacation that I've had in the works for a year and a half. I called Kawasaki customer support and I asked them, why don't you guys just buy me out? I obviously have a lemon. I'll get another machine. The lady said even if we decided to do that, that would take months and you probably still wouldn't make your vacation. So the engine got rebuilt. I picked it up. I took it for a shakedown ride. Did real good that day. As I was loading it on the trailer, I noticed a hole in the belt cover. I didn't quite understand where that hole came from, and then I realized that bolt came loose and it drilled itself through the cover. So I took it back to the dealer. They put a new cover on it, of course replaced the belt or the bolt, cleaned everything out and gave it back to me. So they had me come and pick the machine up. At this point the engine has been rebuilt, the transmission has been rebuilt, it's had new axles, new carrier bearing, and the fan and cooling system has been replaced. I took it to Lingo, East Lynn, the weekend after I picked it up, and I did have my first successful full day ride with it that weekend. And then that was Saturday. Then on Sunday I was in some of the trails around East Lynn and the machine overheated again. So we realized that the fan wasn't working again. I was able to get it back to the campground. We loaded on the trailer and then I dropped it off at the dealer a few days later. They called me back that same day, said come and get it, that it was just a defective breaker. For the next ride I took it to the mountains. We got up on top of the ridge, started headed towards Golly Bridge, started hearing a noise. It was coming from the driver's side. I thought it was from the clutch assembly. It was kind of a high-pitched noise. Didn't seem to be affecting the machine a whole lot. We made it to the town of Golly Bridge, dropped down, I got lunch. We were coming back out to head back to the trailer, and the machine made a super loud screeching sound, and then it went bang and the oil dropped out onto the trail as I was trying to climb up to the mountain. The guys came up, they helped me down off the mountain, they helped me turn the machine around, and then once again we had to tow it out of the woods. Being that I was being towed, I had to go through some holes that I normally would have went around, but I had to go where the tow vehicle was able to pull me. So I take it back to the dealer, I drop it off. Kawasaki instructs the dealer to tear the engine apart and send them pictures. The engine is basically a mess, and in one of the pictures Kawasaki seen a little bit of mud on the radiator, most of it's around the radiator support. They instantly said, there's the problem, that's neglect. We are going to deny the claim, even though it had overheated the ride before, and that's the same exact reason why they had to rebuild the engine the first time. So I went down to the dealer to look at the engine and to look at the radiator, and sure, there was some mud on the interior, on the engine side of the radiator, but it was far from being clogged. I called customer service. I told them, look, maybe you guys didn't realize that this thing overheated the ride before. It never overheated the day that the engine blew up. Maybe your tech didn't realize that. Let him know. So then I got a note saying that they were still denying the claim, that they were still saying that it was the radiator. So then I called back again. This time I asked for a supervisor, told them, look, I got 23 pages of documentation on this thing, on the problems I've had with it. The engine is trashed. It did not overheat the day that it blew up. It did overheat the ride before because the fan quit working, breaker was bad. I don't understand why this isn't a black and white issue. I told him, like I told the others before, that the amount of mud that he's looking at on that radiator probably got there from where we had to drag it through a bunch of holes to get it out of the woods. Hey Brad, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm creating a video. Basically what I'm trying to do is prove to Kawasaki that the radiator is not an issue to my problem, that the radiator was after the fact. So basically what I was calling you for was the day that my machine blew up and that you had to drag me out of the woods. We all met. It was me and you and your in-laws and your wife, 3 machines. Yep. And we all unloaded together. We all followed the same tracks, and nobody else had any issues but me.
Right, yeah, your machine was the only one acting up for sure, thank goodness.
And I never overheated. You know, the time that the whole time that we were riding.
No, I don't remember mentioning any issues about that at all. It was just the unknown noise that we kept hearing, and progressively got worse towards the end of the day.
So, when we heard the noise, I thought it had something to do with the clutch, since it had filled up with mud the 2 rides before that, where it drilled a hole in the cover, and that's kind of what I told you up until the time that this thing blew up.
We were talking, we talked about that several times, but we talked about last time when we was filling up that Exxon before we started back, because I remember even we was double checking oil and stuff like that, and everything was good on that end. So
now I told them that you guys had to come, and I was climbing a hill, and then this thing made a big pop noise, and then I stopped it, and the oil hit the ground, and you guys came up and helped me down off the mountain, got me turned around, and then we drug it out of the woods. And I also mentioned that we went through some holes that I had no choice. Because
the only way out of there. There was one way in and one way out. So I mean, didn't have a choice but to go through the holes coming back out. Just because of the path of least resistance.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I mentioned to him. But so anyhow, I I just wanted to try to get this on record so that,
Yeah. But those holes weren't bad, because shoot, I mean, if I was able to pull your machine out with no assistance at all, I mean, I didn't have any trouble getting through them, even pulling you through them. So
well,
it's not like they were, big, deep mud holes or that bad. So
yeah, Kawasaki is just saying that my radiator was extremely plugged, and that was the reason for the engine going south. And I'm saying that radiator has nothing to do with it. That the machine overheated because the fan quit working on the rod before. And so that's.
Well, you definitely had issues with it. I know that for sure. So I don't know if they're all related or separate, but you definitely had more than your share of problems with it, for the kind of riding we do, or any riding for that matter. So.
Yeah, well, that's true. So now back to the customer support supervisor. The guy said, "Let me look at my the documentation. I'll get back to you." He got back to me and sent me a screenshot of the very first claim with that mileage, and basically said, "You traveled 300 and some miles before the engine blew up, and has nothing to do with the breaker." And then I had to write back and say, "Look, just like I told you on the phone, just like I told the person who works for you on the phone, there was only 55 miles between when the breaker went bad and the engine blew up, and why are you sending me the initial claim and not the latest one?" And then he wrote back and said, "I'm sticking with the initial analysis that your radiator was plugged." They keep using the word plugged even though it wasn't plugged, and they keep saying 30% even though they've got a picture in their hand. There's no way for them to actually calculate the 30%. They also didn't tell me whether that was surface area or cooling area, but I explained to them again, look, the radiator is not in the equation here. The damage happened when it overheated the ride before. And so I asked him, "Why did you send me that claim?" He said, "Well, that's the only one that we have. If the dealer thinks that there was a defective, have them contact us and we'll revisit it again." So it's been a year and change. I'm still without this machine. I've only got to ride it a couple of times in that year, mainly when I say a couple of times, I mean successful rides. Usually it's a test ride and taking it back to the dealership. So I have given him the invoice from the dealer that has my mileage, that has what the notes, it has everything on it. And yet they ask me to contact the dealer, to have the dealer contact them. And I'm thinking, aren't you guys the ones that have customer and support in your title? I truly am thinking that they're looking for ways to deny the claim instead of for ways to figure out what happened. So that's my experience. You can decide for yourself whether you're willing to go through the same kind of stuff that I went through. I'm sure there's been many people that's been satisfied with how they were treated, and I'm happy for them. But this has been my experience thus far. The good news is I didn't let it stop me from doing my bucket list trip. So we ended up doing Moab, Sand Hollow, Mackay, Idaho, Crow's Nest Pass, and Canada. But I had to do it in a Honda instead of my Kawasaki that I bought for this specific purpose.